Father John Connolly decided to introduce something that was not new. It had been used back in Ireland. He called it the Peace Society, whereupon he, as the spiritual leader in the community, introduces this concept by having the people at the church sign up, the men sign up, and the idea is that they would form a group and would go from house to house, farm to farm, searching for any stolen goods. Well, James Donley wanted to sign up, but his son William said, "Dad, if you do, our enemies will steal something, hide it in our barns, and unbeknownst to us, they'll come, we'll let them on the property since we've signed up, and they'll find it and it'll give them excuse to boot us out of the township." So by not signing up, James Donley more or less victimized himself. There was an episode where there was a cow that was owned by Mr. Thompson next door, and it went wandering, and they blamed the Donnellys. Eventually, the Thompsons discovered the cow on their own property back in their own bush. But that didn't really stop them from getting the wheels of their justice, so to speak, rolling. The Peace Society, unannounced or unbeknownst to Father John Connolly, formed its own perverted, twisted inner group called the vigilantes, the vigilance group. And they met at the Cedar Swamp Schoolhouse, which still exists today as an implement shed. It has been gutted. It does not, it doesn't have anything in it anymore except tractors that are of this day. There's a friend of mine who has the clock that was in the Cedar Swamp Schoolhouse at that time, and he has it for sale today for $3,000. I think originally it went for literally $2.95 back in the 1860s. However, the group met at the Cedar Swamp Schoolhouse and planned the demise of the Donnellys. They thought, we've got to get these people. We've got to do something to put them down and put them out of the community. Their opportunity came in January of 1880, I believe it was January 15th, right behind ourselves over here, just up the road. There is a house that exists now, and in that house are 3 beams from what was Grouchy Ryder's original log cabin. Now, Grouchy Ryder was one of the vigilantes. He lived here and basically got along well with the Donnellys for over 20 years. However, in January of 1880, his barn burned to the ground, and the other vigilantes told him to charge the Donnelly boys with the crime. Well, that kind of backfired because the Donnelly boys could all be accounted for the night that the barn burned. Undaunted, Patrick Grouchy Ryder charged Mr. and Mrs. Donnelly. She was 59 and he was 64 years of age. And they dragged them into the little courtroom over in Granton, 5 miles away. There was no evidence. Even Justice Grant, an elderly man who was the magistrate, realized that the charge was trumped up. Let the vigilantes bring the Mr. and Mrs. Donnelly several times over there. Finally, he said, "There is no evidence here. I will allow you to bring Mr. and Mrs. Donnelly one more time, February the 4th. And if you cannot produce evidence to show that they burned the barn, then I'm going to dismiss the charges." And of course, Mr. and Mrs. Donley would be able to charge the vigilantes with false arrest. Well, they came out of there, and the vigilantes thought, if we can't prove that the Donnellys burned the barn, we're going to have to pay. We're going to have to pay this guy who killed Paddy Farrell back in 1857. And it really didn't matter that James Donnelly took in the young Farrell boy and raised him as his own. It didn't really matter that he helped a number of other people in the community. There was this feeling of animosity generated within a small group aimed right towards the Donnelly family. The vigilantes decided to come up here to this place early Tuesday, February the 3rd, the night before that last court case. But they didn't know where everybody was. They wanted to take everybody out, tie them to the trees, and extract confessions from them for all their various crimes. They did approach 2 young brothers in their early 20s, James and William Feely. It looks like the word is to be pronounced Feely, but it's actually pronounced Feely. They said to the 2 boys, if you come up here on Tuesday, tell us where everybody is, we will pay the $500 that your father owes on his mortgage. And if he doesn't pay that $500, he's going to lose the farm. He said, well, what are you going to do? He said, all we're going to do is take the Donnellys outside, tie them to the trees, beat them up, and force confessions from them. Well, Tuesday came. 64-year-old James Donley and 25-year-old Tom went into Lucan, pick up some supplies at Armitage's store, and then over to Alice Street to pick up young 15-year-old Johnny O'Connor. He was the son of Michael and Mary O'Connor, friends of the family. They wanted to have the boy out here to house sit the next day when they went to that last court case. What had happened was that back in 1877, their barn had been burned to the ground and had been rebuilt. Now the barn to my left, back here, dates from 1877 and was here the night that the massacre took place. We're going to go up there a little bit later. They went up and slopped the hogs, took care of the cattle, the horses, came back here. After supper, young Johnny O'Connor said, where am I going to sleep? Tom said, you're going to sleep along with me out here in this little bedroom here. 64-year-old James Donley said, no, laddie, you're going to sleep along with me in my bedroom, which was up here over by this large tree. And after supper, probably around 8:30, Johnny O'Connor, dressed in street clothes, I have a photograph taken of him shortly after the massacre, and by the London Free Press, dressed in the same clothing that he had. It's rather large print, so we'll be able to get a picture of that. Johnny O'Connor in street clothes crawled into the big four-poster bed here and can remember in his testimony that he remembered a visitor arriving at the house. This was James Feely. He arrived probably